If you're studying for the GED Mathematical Reasoning test, this video is for you. Relearn what you need to know. Building on what we reviewed in our last video on numbers, this is about the number line. If you missed part 1, check it out linked below. This is part 2 of a multi-part math playlist, so be sure to check out the links in the description. Let's get started.
In this video, we're going to talk about the number line. We have 4 number lines here, and they're all the same except we maybe have more numbers on some than others, or maybe sometimes you have a blank number line. What's important to understand about a number line is this. The farther to the left that any number lies on the number line, the smaller it is, and the farther to the right that a number lies on the number line, the larger it is. For example, if I put a dot on -2 and I put a dot over here on +1, -2 is smaller than 1 because -2 is farther to the left on the number line. One way we can write this is -2 is less than 1. Take note of the inequality symbol here. -2 is less than 1. Or we could write it like this. 1 is greater than -2. These two inequalities mean the exact same thing. Take note of how I'm saying this. -2 is less than 1. 1 is greater than -2. The other two number lines here, again, they're the same. Notice zero's in the center. You don't have to necessarily have 0 in the center. We will actually see that right here in a moment when we look at this example. But let's come to this third number line right here. Let me put a dot on -8 and a dot on -7. With these two numbers here, if we want to compare them, notice -8 is farther to the left than -7 is. Therefore, -8 is less than -7, and that is a very common misconception that I see with students. But I want you to remember, the farther to the left that a number lies on the number line, the smaller it is. The farther to the right that a number lies on the number line, the larger it is. So we have -8 is less than -7, or we could write it like this. -7 is greater than -8. And now with this blank number line down here, I'm actually going to use this number line on our example. So pasting that on over here, if we look at this example, place the following numbers in order from greatest to least. Greatest to least. Now you may be able to do this without a number line, but I'm just going to show it to you with a number line. And remember earlier how I mentioned 0 doesn't have to be in the middle? I'm going to put 0 right here, and then I'm just going to come in here and label 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Notice I'm increasing as I move to the right, and we want to decrease as we move to the left. So starting with -1, then we have -2, and so forth. Now you may notice here that it kind of looks jumbled, right? Well, you don't necessarily have to come in here and label every single tick mark. For example, if I were to erase 1, 2, 3, 4, and I erase 6, and then I come in here and erase -1, -2, -3, -4, notice this kind of gives it more organization. It doesn't look as clustered. And this is totally fine to do as long as you label some of the points. So I'm pretty much labeling every 5th point. And by doing that, you can see a pattern. So even though we don't have these numbers labeled here, we have -1, -2, -3, -4, and -5 because it's labeled like that. If you take this approach with the number line, make sure you keep them equally spaced and make sure you use the same gaps. We don't want to go from -5 straight to -10 here. You have to keep that pattern the same. So since we went from -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, this has to be -6. We can't make the jump and say -10 here. Keep everything equally spaced. So now let's come in here and plot these numbers. Plotting a 5, that's right here. Plotting a -12. So remember, we have 0, -5, -10, -11. Here's -12. I'm just going to come in here and label that too. You don't have to do that. And then our last number is 0. Now to answer our question, from greatest to least, biggest to smallest, the farther a number lies to the right, the bigger it is. So 5 is the greatest number out of these 3 numbers that we've plotted, followed by 0 and then -12. And this matches choice C perfectly. Now, if the question was reversed and it said write the numbers in order from least to greatest, we would want to say -12, then 0, then 5, and take note of that right there. That would have been answer D had the question said put the numbers in order from least to greatest. So this helpful note over here, I did discuss this with you. You may think that -10 is greater than -2, but it is not, because -10 is to the left of -2. Therefore, to write that inequality, or one way to write that for this little tip here, is -10 is less than -2. And then remember, if we wrote the -2 first, we would want to say -2 is greater than -10. And there you have it, an introduction to the number line, various ways of seeing it, and then you can even run across a blank one. Taking note sometimes that 0 doesn't have to be in the middle of the number line, and sometimes you may not want to put every single number down just to keep things clean. And that's it for this video. Smart Addition will see you in the next lesson.